Well, thanks so much, guys, for coming to the talk. Really excited to have Rick and Wendy Walleigh here to talk about their book, From Silicon Valley to Swaziland, and to talk a little bit also about the value and promise of an encore career. And then also, we have Megan Moyerman from TechnoServe, who will talk a little more about the organization and other ways to get involved, because encore careers aren't the only ways to get involved with TechnoServe, though they are a great one. So Megan will kick it off.
So I just want to say I'm really happy to be here. So thanks for having me, Lindsay, and for having Rick and Wendy here. I think we're all excited. So as Lindsay said, I'm just going to talk a little bit about TechnoServe, an introduction to our organization. We believe in the power of private enterprise to transform lives. Just a quick look at one crop, coffee. Coffee is a really important cash crop for more than 9 million smallholder farmers. And small family-run farms contribute to more than half of the world's coffee supply. Unfortunately, nearly half of those families are living on less than $1 a day, and that's 4.2 million households and about 20 million individuals. So we have here a picture of Jacqueline Mukundori, and she's a member of the Mizeri Coffee Farmers Cooperative in Rwanda. She grows coffee in about 1 to 2 hectares of land, and in 2010 she produced about 90 kilograms of coffee beans. She has 7 children, and she does have additional income besides coffee. So TechnoServe, through agronomy training that we provided, she learned how to apply fertilizer, how to prune her trees, manage pests, and other critical skills that are necessary for her to improve the quality and the quantity of her coffee. TechnoServe also helped establish local wet mills so that they run as small businesses, and they help to ensure that the coffee beans that come from Jacqueline's coffee are of high quality. And TechnoServe also helped to connect these wet mills with new markets so that Jacqueline and her coffee receive the best price. And you might already know this, but some of the coffee from Rwanda and other of our locations that we work in made their way to Pete's Coffee and some other different coffee chains. So this is exciting. Okay, so our mission. TechnoServe works with enterprising people in the developing world, and we do that to build competitive farms, businesses, and industries. What do these words mean to us? They enterprising. So the people that we work with are hardworking, and they are aspirational. They're agents of change, and they're leaders in their communities. Work with. So we work with them, not for them, and we help them to acquire the skills that they need to have successful businesses. We connect them to opportunities that they previously just were out of reach for them. Competitive. We help build businesses that can achieve success, small scale or large, or on the, short and long term success in the marketplace. We also help to, these types of businesses are sustainable sources of change, so they're long-term sources of change. And we're hoping that they stay like that long after TechnoServe is out of the picture. Our founder, Ed Bullard, almost 50 years ago, went to Ghana and for about a year and volunteered with his family. And from that experience, he really believed that talent is universal, but unfortunately, opportunity is not. TechnoServe develops business solutions to poverty. We help connect people to capital, to markets, to suppliers, to information. And we believe that we're partners in this process, and I think that was a big key to Ed Bullard when he started the organization. We're a nonprofit. We've been around for, again, almost 50 years, so we've been around for a long time. We have programs in about 29 different countries. We have about a little more than 1,400 employees, the majority of whom actually work in the field. Only about 60 to 80 of our employees work in US, so DC, New York, Connecticut, and then also in London. And in 2014, our revenue was about 80 million. So we're not small, and we've been around for a long time. We do a lot of work. So what do our programs do? Well, some of our programs help develop capacity. And we try to help individuals and communities acquire new skills. We help them to share knowledge, to apply opportunities or apply technology that will help them grow their business and farms and help them be successful. And some of these programs involve financial literacy, financial management training, youth training, so youth leadership training. We have farmer organization strengthening, we work with that, intensive operational support, and so on. We also, our programs help strengthen market connections. So we help coordinate among industry players, and we help them connect emerging farms and businesses to capital, to information, to suppliers. Some of our programs that involve this area would include business planning, market linkages, supplier linkages, financial services, and capital raising. So also some of our programs involve or help us to improve the business environment. And that's when we encourage self-sustaining economic activity by addressing policies, information, and incentives that help markets function better. So our programs within that region would involve industry strategic planning, developing local agricultural service organizations, youth and gender focus, so making sure a lot of our programs focus on youth and also include a lot of women in them. So we also have environmental sustainability and ICT innovation or integration. And if you're not familiar with what ICT means, it's information communication technology. So for instance, working with farmers to use their mobile phones for bank accounts, tracking financial information and all of that. In 2014, we reached more than 333 farmers, businesses, and employees, and we helped add more than $61 million in revenue and wages, and more than we helped mobilize more than $23 million in new finance that's necessary to grow markets and to be successful in your business and your farms. Okay, and so we're back to Jacqueline. What did TechnoServe do for Jacqueline? Just as a reminder, Jacqueline grows coffee. She has 7 children, and she lived on about $1 a day. Well, TechnoServe helped her to improve her farming, helped her to produce better coffee, and to have a better business. She is holding right now health insurance cards that she was able to purchase from the profits of her coffee. And these health insurance cards, so this health insurance helped her to treat her or get treatment for her son who contracted malaria. In addition, she was able to open up a savings account, so she's able to start saving. And she also used some of her savings to purchase a cow so that her family could drink milk. So what does TechnoServe do? TechnoServe uses business solutions to help improve the lives of people living in poverty in developing worlds. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Rick and Wendy Walleigh now, who are going to talk about their experiences as volunteer consultants working with TechnoServe in the field and about their book on that experience.
Great, thanks, Megan. So what do you do after a successful career in Silicon Valley? obviously moved to Swaziland and worked with poor people for a nonprofit. That's not the obvious thing to most high-tech veterans, but that is what Wendy and I did a few years ago. And we'd like to try and convince you to think about doing something similar at some point in your life, whether you're at our stage where we were getting close to a traditional retirement age, or whether you just want to take your career in a more socially beneficial direction. In any case, neurologists tell us that if we want to keep our brains young and active, that we should challenge them with new and different things. And I can tell you that by working with poor people in Africa, you will be challenged and learn new things that you could never have imagined. For example, did you know that in Swaziland, the traditional bride price that a new husband would have to pay to his future father-in-law was 17 cows? I never knew that, but I learned. And I also learned that you could negotiate a discount if the bride was not a virgin. So if the bride had a child already or was obviously pregnant when she got married, that was pretty much assured that you could get a discount. Now, I should tell you that I did not learn any of this by personal experience, even though polygamy is part of traditional Swazi culture. I wasn't willing to go that far for a local experience, and Wendy might have had something to say about it as well. But from more of a work perspective, I think you probably know that our background is in the high-tech industry here in Silicon Valley. My education was in engineering and business, nothing to do with agriculture. But if you work with poor people in the developing world, you're going to have to work somewhere in the agricultural value chain. 75% of the world's poor are smallholder farmers. So you will have to work with them at some point in some way if you're going to work with the poor. And so as I did that, in working, I ended up working in a number of different agricultural value chains. The one that I found most fascinating was the pork industry. And I loved the terminology. Did you know that when little piglets are born, they're called suckers? And then 6 weeks later, they become weaners. That's W-E-A-N-E-R-S. They don't become the other kind of hot dog wieners till much later. So as males grow, they become porkers and then baconers. The females become gilts, which is analogous to a heifer, and then they become breeding sows. And breeding sows have litters of about 10 suckers every 6 months for 3 years. And then they become tired sows. No wonder, right? And when they become tired sows, their litters start to decrease in size. And so then they become weaners, the hot dog type, because they get sent to the butcher. So how did we get to Africa? Well, as Wendy and I got into our 50s, we started thinking about wanting to do something more directly socially beneficial as the end of our careers. And Wendy took the first step, and after thinking about what she wanted to do, she became the Vice President of Marketing and Development for the local chapter of Junior Achievement. And she took a salary cut of 50%, but she got to work in areas that she was interested in: entrepreneurship, education, and youth, primarily young women. So she did that for 3 years, and then I decided, well, it's my turn too. I want to do this as well. I didn't know what I wanted to do though. So I started thinking about it, and as I did, I realized I could do anything I wanted to. I didn't have to worry about my next raise. I didn't have to worry about a promotion. I didn't have to worry about my next job. So I really expanded my mind and thought about, well, what would I like to do? And so, to make a long story short, I did a lot of research. I read about 15 books on international development. I did a lot of networking, and I found TechnoServe, whose tagline is Business Solutions to Poverty. And with my background and Wendy's background as well, they had roles that we could fulfill and support. So I contacted the CEO, who was Bruce McNamer at the time. I met with him and talked about TechnoServe, and he introduced me to the volunteer consultant program. For those of you who haven't heard of it, we call them VOLCONs, V-O-L-C-O-N-S, volunteer consultants. And so I was ready to sign up for a role right away.
I was not. Rick and I over the years had talked about living abroad, an international career assignment. Paris, London, Hong Kong were what I imagined. When we started talking about international economic development, I kind of understood those were out of the picture. So I said, okay, I'm willing to go along. You need to do really good research and make sure we're able to do this financially, because I figured we were not going to make money on this. And I said, but I have 4 absolute conditions for any place we want to go. No flying bullets, must have hot showers, must have flush toilets, and no countries with Stan in their names. So that eliminated a few countries, but not many, and probably eliminated much of the Peace Corps work. But I figured when I was ready to leave, I wanted to be in a place where I could be generally comfortable, recognizing I was going to move far, far away. So it took me a while to get ready to leave Junior Achievement. I had to finish a major project. But when I was ready, Rick and I both sent our resumes to the Volcon manager at the time. And she sent them out immediately to the country directors across TechnoServe. And within less than 48 hours, we got a contact from the Swaziland country director, who had opportunities for both of us with each of our different skill sets. And she said, can you be here later this week? We were not quite ready, but within a month, we were living in Swaziland. So when some people ask, how did you choose Swaziland? We say, it chose us. So that's how we got there.
So the journey from San Francisco to Swaziland is about as far as you can go on Earth. It took us 36 hours, 2 overnight legs, 4 flights in total, and we finally got to Matsafa International Airport near Manzini, Swaziland. Now, Matsafa Airport is a very, very small airport. Their whole boarding lounge is less than half the size of this room. And so, however, it's Swaziland's only airport, so by definition, it's an international airport. So we got there, and we were hoping that our driver would be outside and waiting for us. Fortunately, he was, and he had pictures of us so that he could recognize who we were as we came out of the lounge. But it wasn't a big problem since we were only white people on the plane. So we were easy to recognize. As we got out of the airport, we went into our office, saw the office, and started our work. And I'll make it a short part, go quickly through our work experience. We worked in Swaziland for 6 months, and after that, we decided, well, that wasn't bad. We feel like we could tolerate some more, and we wanted to contribute some more, so we asked the regional vice president for Africa, and he said, oh yeah, go up to Kenya for another year and work up there. So we did that. So in Swaziland, I worked mostly with small businesses, trying to help them create jobs, create economic opportunity. Wendy worked primarily to start up a youth program, which turned out to be Junior Achievement of Swaziland. We also worked on the business plan competition in Swaziland. In Kenya, I took on a different kind of role. I took on an internal role because the country directors of Kenya and Uganda were brand new. They'd never been country directors before. They hadn't had those kind of management responsibilities. So I worked to support them primarily on improving project management and improving internal financial management. Wendy worked primarily, again, on youth programs with young women in enterprise, and then once again we both worked on the business plan competition. So, would you like to show some slides?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll let you.
I'll click.
Most of these are, well, first of all, let's start with, for those not familiar, where the heck Swaziland is. As you can see, it's surrounded on 3 sides by South Africa and 1 side by Mozambique. It is landlocked. It is a tiny country. I think it's under the size of New Jersey, bigger than Rhode Island, just to give you an idea, and it's about 1 million people, versus Kenya, which has its own coastline and has, I don't know, how many millions of people? 30, 40 million.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the city of Nairobi has about 4 million. So we went from a city of Baban, which is 100,000, to a city of 4 million. Okay. This, in my estimation, is a tired sow. She certainly looks tired, and I'm not sure you can count every single piglet, but I think it's a slightly smaller litter, so we're just going to call her a tired sow. Rick and I were able to finish projects while we were in our 6 months in Swaziland. I was very excited that we were able to establish Junior Achievement of Swaziland, and we piloted our first class before we left. So Rick and I each taught part of this class called Personal Economics. And the goal of the class is to teach kids about managing their money, importance of staying in school to get a career, how you have to negotiate in the world at large. And one of the things that we had to talk about was debt. Now, thinking about it, most of the curriculum is based on Western knowledge, and it was a Western curriculum that I adapted, but it still was pretty based in Western culture. And one of the elements was credit card debt. And the kids said, "That's the most stupid thing I've ever heard. Why would you spend more money than you have?" As Megan and Rick referred to, Swaziland helps, or Technoserve helps with agricultural value chains. Sometimes they help the farmers, and sometimes they help people like this, which is Eswatini Kitchens in Swaziland, and they process fruits and vegetables from the local smallholder farmers. So they take in stuff that is grown locally and to make sauces, including ketchup, and fruits and vegetable sauces. And they cook it on pretty primitive stoves, kind of like a burner like this with that pot that's that big, and that's how they do it. And yet they're able to get fair trade certified and are selling in Sweden and Germany, in South Africa and Swaziland. So that is pretty impressive for an operation that size. So that was Eswatini Kitchens. That's Rick. And yes, one of these are what he was wearing. So Rick, our son, Adrian, who came to visit us, and Mkaluli was one of our colleagues in the office, his daughter, and his wife, Katie. And particularly Mkaluli persuaded us that he thought when we were going to attend the national major festival called our annual Reed Dance, that we needed to go in costume. And so the nature of the annual Reed Dance is that the traditional homes are made out of reeds, kind of like a shaped dome made out of reeds. And the theory is that every year the Queen Mother needs to have her reed home repaired. So all the young women across the entire country gather reeds and bring them to this one location to help the Queen Mother rebuild her home. That's part one of the operation. Part two is that then these young women sing and parade in front of the king in the hopes that they will be his next wife. So it's Mswati, right? The third, I think, but he was the king at the time. He was already on wife number 14. So I think now he has number 15. His father had 83 wives. We were not going to go there. But in any case, so there we were in costume. And we entered this very large football-like stadium. And we were certainly only a handful, among only a handful of white people. And we had to walk across the whole end of the stadium to get where we could sit. I think we had as much attention on us as the young women. Well, the other thing about the young women that was unique is that they were topless. About a decade ago, they were naked, but they had a little PC and were able to just be topless. So obviously Rick and Adrian, our son, enjoyed that, but even they said after the first 10,000 pairs of boobs, they kind of all look alike. So we left. One of the programs that I worked on when we were in Kenya is called upscaling. And this program helped small micro businesses grow to expand the number of employees that they would be able to hire. And this was Aspen Orchards. They created yogurt drinks. And it started pretty small out of his own home, the gentleman who ran it, and cooked pretty much like you saw in the Eswatini kitchens, a single big burner stove with a big pot. And he was very successful in his area and was bottling yogurt drinks and selling them to the local markets, and they were very popular. So he had an internal process for getting the bottles ready for market. You can see the labels, and every bottle was hand labeled, and every bottle was hand sealed. So the little foil tops that you see in a lot of things, they use an iron to iron those on by hand. So the good news is they were able to hire a number of local youth to actually do this. So he was a very successful small business. We helped him with his finance and accounting so that he would be able to grow his business. I was also involved with Young Women in Enterprise, as Rick mentioned. This is Mathare, which is one of the major slums in Nairobi. This is a typical back street, if you will, or back alley behind the homes that look like that. They are powered by propane lights. You have to walk even in here to get your water. So it's pretty primitive, but it's right on the edge of Nairobi. The program, Young Women in Enterprise, gathers young women from different circumstances, often in communities like this, and teaches them how to behave in business, how to run a business, and it also teaches life skills. So some commonality with junior achievement plus the life skills. And it was totally funded by Nike. And that's a Nike representative in the back who came to visit. So we took him on a tour of Mathare. And that's Esther Peixoto. I'm not Esther Peixoto, that's another person. Kamau, Esther Kamau, who was one of our colleagues on the program. So we were giving him a tour of the area. This is one of the businesses. And this young woman who's kind of bending over in the back, her business was selling hot boiled milk to local people in her Mathare area. And again, she used a pretty primitive stove and a pretty primitive pot and took milk in, boiled it so that it was clean, and sold it to people and to little kids, and was able to make money at it. Young women that were helped were often what they call school leavers, which we call dropouts. So giving them the tools to be able to have a business or be employed successfully in a business was really important to them. And being able to handle their various relatives who might want to take advantage of them was also a big element of what we were doing. This young woman is Cecilia Katungwa. She was the winner of the regional competition. So once the young women went through their class exercises, they would then be able to create a 3-page business plan, which they then had to present to local judges from the business community. And the winners of those club contests or community contests went to the regional contest in Nairobi. And Cecilia was the winner of that. She had started a knitting business where she took a little knitting machine, a hand one, not anything that was electrified, a hand knitting machine, and created clothing for babies, sweaters, vests, scarves, etc., for adults. And she was extremely articulate. I don't know if you can see it, but it's like 30,000, what looks like 30,000, but it's Kenya shillings, which amounts to maybe $300-400, depending on the exchange. But that was her grand prize. Amazing young woman. We talked about the value chain that's typical in what a project of TechnoServe's is. This was matoke farmers in Uganda. We went to visit them with some other people from TechnoServe. And the matoke banana is a starch banana, different from what we have, which is considered a dessert banana. But what they do is the matoke are cooked while the fruit is green and then mashed as if it were mashed potatoes, and it's a staple in the Ugandan diet. So every week, as part of the training, the farmers who became part of the training would go to a marketplace and carry their 50 to 100 pound bunches of bananas on whatever mechanism they could do it. Sometimes it was pull carts that they pulled, sometimes it was donkeys, and sometimes it was bicycles. But they knew that every week at a certain time they would get their matoke to market and know that they would get money, which is a major improvement over what they had been able to do. And here's a woman who was receiving some training on fertilizer and irrigation as part of the matoke project. And this is a farming couple, also part of the matoke project. They had noticed that beans, which are an incredibly important staple in Uganda, the beans got low prices during the harvest when they were plentiful, but could be charged higher prices during those off times. And so they borrowed money, got money from their relatives and friends, and used some of their own money and began storing dried beans for those times when they could make more money. So in essence, unbeknownst to them, they independently created leveraged commodity buying. This is the group that we talked with when we were there, one of the groups of farmers who wanted to meet with us when we were visiting. And they had the desire to ask questions and get as much information from us as we could provide. And they also requested that we help them open up the U.S. matoke market. Unfortunately, we had to tell them there was no matoke market in the U.S. They were disappointed, but they were obviously trying to be very enterprising in their perspective of life. And they asked me to take a picture with the Wibbit in the group. They were delightful people. And this was my new friend. Along with beans, most farmers had secondary income from their livestock, goats, cows, chickens, etc. And Rick would not let me take him home with us, but he was my friend. This is a mall that was about a quarter to a half a mile from where we lived in Nairobi. It was called Westgate Mall. I don't know if you are familiar with that name. That was the mall that was blown up by Al-Shabaab a couple of years ago. 67 people died, 100 and some odd, 50, 60 people were severely injured by 4 men who came in and just took over. This is a mall that was where we went to most weekends. It's where we shopped for food. It's where we ate. It was walking distance from our apartment, and we went there every weekend. So it was horribly upsetting to hear about that. The good news was it just reopened this past summer. So it's back to hopefully looking something like that.
One of our main objectives in writing this book was, as I said before, to encourage other people, whether you're our age or your age, to go out and experiment and try something like this and find your own next chapter that can have both purpose and adventure. And in the book, we give a number of suggestions on thinking about this and what you should do. And I'll just give you a couple today. The first one is do something that excites you. Particularly if you're our age and you're doing this as the last stage in your career, all the restrictions are off. You don't have to do what you've always done. You can think about new things. And if you've always had an idea in the back of your head that you wanted to do something or experiment with something, that's the time to do it. You can also do this at a break in your career as well. And it's a great opportunity to have a chance to explore something new and different and help people at the same time. The other suggestion I would have is to do something that makes you feel good about yourself. Particularly as you get later in your career, people start to think about their legacy, and they think about asking questions such as, am I proud of my life? Am I proud of what I've done? Am I happy if I look back on my life at what I've accomplished? And when they do that, people start to think about giving back, particularly if they've been fortunate in their lives. And that's a real opportunity to do something good for the world, but also psychologists tell us that people that do things for other people feel happier themselves. And so I would urge you to think about that, to do those kinds of things. And what's important is not what other people think, but what you think about yourself. Now, on the other hand, I can tell you that it does feel good when somebody else recognizes what you've done and compliments you. I had an experience that way in Swaziland. I mentioned the business plan competition where we not only took in the business plans, but we trained people in business concepts along the way. And one day I was at the Swazi Sun Hotel, and a young man walked up to me. He introduced himself. His name was Timbisa. I didn't recognize him at first, but he knew me, and he said that I had done some of the training that he had attended, and he'd been a participant in the business plan competition. He had the idea to start up a mobile hair salon where he would take his equipment, go to people's houses, particularly in off hours, and then cut and color their hair. And he'd been thinking about doing that for a long time, but he hadn't had the confidence to actually start up the business. He felt like he knew about some parts of the business, but not the other parts. And so that had held him back. But with the training that TechnoServe gave, he had confidence that he was going to go out and start up his business. And so he was very thankful that we had come to TechnoServe and had come to Swaziland, and that TechnoServe had put on this business plan competition. And he had been a semifinalist. He didn't make it into the finals, but we were doing some more work with the semifinalists to keep them going. And he said he really thanked God for sending TechnoServe to Swaziland, and us included. So I felt rewarded much more than I deserved with that experience. So, in conclusion, just do it. Go out there, be adventurous, have fun, do something good for the world and feel good about it yourself. So thank you.
The role of technology. So, you're going in, you're working with farmers, things like that. How do you see, and I don't know when you were in Swaziland, but how do you see technology, especially, working at Google, like, can our products even help solve any of these problems that you're dealing with in these small areas? I'm just curious because I think as a lot of Google is focusing on emerging markets and places in Africa where they have mobile phone, they're growing very rapidly, and we want to figure out how can we help in these kind of situations. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's opportunities for technology. We already are doing a number of things with technology, and as smartphones get cheaper, there'll be a lot more opportunities. Some of the things that are available now in some countries, I think you've probably heard of M-Pesa in Kenya. If you haven't heard about it, this is basically banking on your phone. So without a bank account in a bank, it just through the phone company, you can send and receive money, you can have a balance, and it's very simple. They're way ahead of us in that regard. There's a lot of communication that happens with farmers, both directions, telling farmers what the prices are in various markets for their produce so that they can choose to go to this town or that town to sell their produce. There are advisories coming out that say, okay, now's the time to apply fertilizer or think about pruning your trees. There's a lot of work going on today, a lot of concern about traceability of food through the value chain, particularly if there's a problem. People want to search back and say, where did that problem come from so that we can eliminate it. But a lot of concern, a lot of requirements, particularly to get into the EU for the traceability of produce. And so technology offers a lot of opportunity there with GPS tracking and being able to link the location of the farm that produced some produce and tracking that through the value chain. So some other examples. We've set up a portal that is a coffee transparency portal where for each co-op we show the price that the co-op paid to the farmer for their coffee and the price that they got in the market. And so this is a way to make everything visible because there's a lot of corruption, as you probably know. And sometimes the people that run the co-ops skim a little off the top as it goes through. And so if you see that your co-op is giving you a lot lower price than everybody else, you start to ask questions. And so there's a few examples, but there are lots more opportunities. And as I say, regular traditional cell phones are really cheap and they're pervasive, and text messaging is really cheap. With smartphones, there's lots of opportunities, and hopefully they'll come down in price, and there'll be more and more things to do.
But still, the internet is not the dominant means of communication.
Yeah.
It's just there's no infrastructure in place to do that. So I think phones will probably be the dominant communication tool for quite a while longer.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest problems I faced when I was in Panama when trying to use business for sustainable development was trying to change the villagers' mindsets of kind of like what you mentioned with the credit card of they couldn't even conceive the fact of spending more money than they had. Well, when I tried to explain the fact of making a profit, they didn't really understand why would they sell something to someone who needed it for more money than maybe that person had to offer. And it was very nice to see that from my point of view, and this selflessness that we don't really see too often here in kind of a competitive culture, but in the sense that business development, to be sustainable, of course, you need to make money to have these savings. And I'm just curious if in Swaziland you kind of met some resistance to that, kind of just a cultural mindset, or?
We didn't see exactly that, but what we've seen in a number of countries is also a cultural mindset of, how can I be successful? We've done a number of programs with youth who just see things the way they are, see what their parents did, and they don't have an idea that they can actually have a business and make money. Particularly in farming. As I said, 75% of the world's poor are smallholder farmers, and it's primarily subsistence. They don't think about, well, gee, if you have extra milk, you could sell it, or if you have a couple of chickens, you could sell the eggs, or you can have subsistence crops over here to feed your family, and you can have a cash crop over here and make a cash income. And so a lot of the training that we've done with youth has been to open up their eyes about opportunities and to give them the confidence that they can do it themselves. So different cultural issues, but cultural issues, analogous cultural issues.
I think the other thing is it often takes a leader who is going to take a risk to kind of be at the forefront of whatever recruitment you're trying to put in place. And so TechnoServe often looks for kind of the local leaders in an area and pull them in. And then people go, well, if he's doing it, maybe I should do that. So it's kind of almost like a standard business practice where you look for people who are risk takers and you try to bring them to what you want them to start being able to do, and then it kind of ripples out from there.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit curious about how specifically you said you had an engineering and sales background, how that sort of allowed you, like what skills you were able to gain there, how that specifically allowed you to help in Swaziland, sort of the application of that.
Okay, well, it didn't teach me to be a pig farmer, but TechnoServe's approach is business solutions to poverty. So we believe in building up the private sector, independent businesses to get people out of poverty. And so in Swaziland, I was primarily working with small businesses. Now, I couldn't advise the pig farmers on how to feed the pigs better or take care of them better, whatever, but I could teach them about finances and get them to look at their business and whether they were making money or not. I worked with another company that was trying to pressure treat poles for telephone poles, and I put together a business plan for them so that they could get financing to build the factory to do the pressure treating, et cetera. So that's the kind of thing. I use my business skills. I didn't have to learn baking or water treatment or raising pigs or what have you. So, yeah. We've given this talk or similar talks at a number of different venues. And we were, a month or so ago, we were at the Los Altos Library. And at the end of the talk, the woman in the back row raised her hand and said, well, I came tonight because I had been in Swaziland after you left. I lived there a couple years with my husband, and she said the strangest thing, Tembisa used to cut my hair. He would come to my house and cut my hair, and he did a great job. And so I was really pleased to hear about that. So that was a great experience. And one more thing, after the presentation, feel free to take a book. They've got donation envelopes in there for TechnoServe, so hopefully you'll give TechnoServe a donation, but feel free to take one.
I'm just going to talk about ways that you can get involved as well with TechnoServe if you're interested. The first way is what very similar or the same as what Rick and Wendy did, is through the Volunteer Consultant Program. I'm actually the manager of that program. And then also through the Global Advisory Council, and Lindsay knows a lot about that as well. Volunteer Consultant Program, again, Rick and Wendy Walleigh did this. We have been around since about 2001. We've engaged more than 970 volunteer consultants. We've sent them out into the field. They work with our full-time staff to further the mission of TechnoServe. We send them to places in Africa and India and also Latin America and the Caribbean. And they could go for about anywhere from 2 to 3 months to 12 months. Sometimes people will do 2-year projects, so they'll do 1 year and then they'll do a whole nother year. But that's a little less common. So if you're interested in that or you want to learn a little bit more about it, feel free to talk to me. Also, our site is there, so technoserve.org/volunteer. So you can read more there and the application's there. The other option is through the Global Advisory Council, and we call them GAC members. So GAC members, they're ambassadors for TechnoServe. So they help with financial support, but they also help with strategic advice. They give strategic advice, and they also help connect TechnoServe with other people and other organizations, and hopefully help with increasing the support for TechnoServe too. So there are some really interesting things that I think you can get involved with if you did decide to be part of the GAC. There's an annual meeting that happens in December every year, and I think, Rick, you spoke to the last one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was interesting. There's also council meetings. There are reports that you get to receive that about TechnoServe that other people outside don't actually get to see. And then there's actually field visits. So for instance, I think Peru was one, Ethiopia is another. So you get to see what TechnoServe projects do and meet some of the beneficiaries too. I think that's a really interesting part. There are some requests for being a GAC member. There's a annual gift of $2,500. And then also to help further TechnoServe's name, get the name out there, and to help connect to other supporters as well. So those are a couple of ways that you can get involved with TechnoServe, and feel free to talk to us about it if you're interested. But otherwise, that's where we are. We're located in DC. That's actually where I am too, and I think that's pretty much it.
Great. Well, a huge thank you again to Rick and Wendy and to Megan for coming today, and thanks to everyone here for joining. And I guess thank you to the people that will watch this in the future online as well. So thanks.